Hi, Britt Davenport here with the Nor-vise fly tying system. Thanks for joining me at my bench. Today I'm tying up a steelhead pattern called the Nuff. This pattern was created by Dave Clark of Clarkston, Washington, and is based off of the buckbug salmon fly. As the story goes, one of the first times Dave used the pattern was on the Clearwater River. The first steelhead he hooked that day was a 35-inch wild hen. He released her, and then within a cast or two later, the second fish hit, and it was a 34-inch wild buck. At this point, he was very excited about the new fly pattern he had created. The third fish of the day gave him a great battle before coming unbuttoned. After the third fish, Dave said to himself, "Well, that's near enough," and the pattern has been called that ever since. The fly has caught fish all the way from the Buckley and Kispiox to Dave's favorite river here in Idaho, the salmon. With that, let's get started. So today I'm using an Ahrex HR 410 number 4. I've already crimped the barb on it. All of our rivers here require barbless hooks. So I'm just going to mount that hook in the vise. If you're using a Norvise, you want to make sure that your hook shank is running just above your jaws. That way, if you could see there, it's just a little high. The closer you can get that, the more in line it'll spin. For thread today, we're using Semperfli Nano silk in 12/0 black. Nano silk is pretty slick, so I start by just waxing the first little bit that I'm using to tie in. It just helps it kind of grip onto itself a little bit better. We'll start by just dressing our hook shank. I'm going to take it all the way just before the barb. Yeah, works for me. For the tail, I am using pearl Krystal Flash. Dave also used sometimes golden pheasant crest. He also was known to use red pheasant rump, so pheasant rump dyed red. And I've also seen it tied with just red hackle fibers. So you can certainly vary it up like that. I've taken just a small clump of Krystal Flash, and we're actually going to double it over, so keep that in mind on how much you use. I'm going to take that up and under. Take a few wraps down. Double it back. A couple of wraps there. And I like to take a wrap underneath as well. I just like it, kicks it up a little bit, and I like how that looks. As far as length, I just use the little tension knot in my vise to measure it, so I know I have the same length each time. I just put my scissors at the back of that. Next up, we're going to be using some fluorescent green and fluorescent orange material. The pattern calls for Uni-floss. You can also use Uni-Stretch. I've tied up a few now using the Semperfli Fluoro-brite in green and orange. So we're going to start by just tying that in. We're just going to have two real small bands of these in the back, so you won't need much of it. The floss would definitely provide a smoother look, but I really like how these materials glow. They just show up really well. You can spin them counterclockwise and they'll flatten out a bit. It does appear to be a 2-strand material, so keep that in mind. If you flatten it out by spinning it too far counterclockwise, the 2 strands do start kind of separating a little bit, which could also be very useful if you're wanting to make dubbing ropes, things like that out of them. Now this one I just have on just a regular bobbin. The other color I'll be using I have spooled up on a Norvise bobbin, so you can do it either way. So next up we'll use orange. So same thing. Just gonna go ahead and just capture that. Oop. If you spin your thread counterclockwise, it'll jump to the rear and makes capturing materials easier. As I say that, it doesn't go right. There we go. So just bind that down, and you want that to go all the way back to where that green is at. And then take a few wraps up, throw a half hitch in, and then we're again going to just take some touching wraps. I'm going to spin it to flatten it out as best we can. And then again, just some touching wraps. This doesn't look near as smooth as if you're using the floss or the Uni-Stretch, but I just really love these materials and how they look in the water. They really, really stand out well. Go ahead and trim that out. So that, you want those segments to be about the same length, give or take. The fish really aren't going to care one way or the other. Just looks like a little bit nicer, tidier fly if they're about the same length. Next up, we're going to be using some Semperfli French Oval tinsel in small for the rib, and then just a plain black saddle hackle. So nothing fancy there. I'm going to tie the ribbon first. Now our body on this is going to be all peacock herl, so we don't have to be too worried about keeping a smooth underbody. Which isn't always the case with flies. I'm just going to bind that down. I'm going to go ahead and prepare my hackle. I like to just pull some of those fibers to the rear and then trim off the tip to create a little bit of a Christmas tree shape. And then we'll just bind that in and then clip that down with your hair clip as well. It just helps keep it out of the way. Now the next part is my favorite part of the whole fly. If you've ever seen a demo tying at a show, you know I love using peacock herl. So here it is, plain strong peacock herl in all of its glory. So this whole body will be made of peacock herl. I'm going to start with a fairly small clump, 5 or 6 pieces, give or take. And then as we progress, we'll add more pieces to it. I'm going to rip off those brittle ends. And we're going to tie it in right up to that butt. Bind those ends down. Go ahead and throw a half hitch in. And then I'm going to take my thread over, bring the peacock over, loosen the tension knot on your vise, and then spin. And so what we're doing is just making a peacock herl rope. Peacock herl is so fragile. I always used to get really frustrated with using it before I learned how to do this on my Nor-vise. It's a really fishy material. It looks great. It's just frustrating sometimes, but this really lowers the frustration level with it, and it also reinforces it to where you're going to get a lot more time out of each fly before it starts falling apart. So next up, I have another clump. Rip those tips off. This clump, I have just a few more fibers in it than the last one. And by adding a few more fibers each time, we're just building in a bit of a taper to the body. Also, one thing worth noting with nano silk, I'm not sure if you've used it, but especially in the smaller sizes, it can be, I don't know what the word would be, but it can, if you're not careful, it can cut through your materials. So if you see me spinning my thread counterclockwise a lot, that's to flatten it out a little bit. And what that does is it just gives it a little bit bigger of a surface area, so it's less likely to cut through the material I'm using. So this next clump, I've got a few more in it. Again, just cut those off. You can cut them off, break them off, whatever's easiest for you. So it's a little repetitive right here. Tie it in, put a half hitch in, bring it over, loosen your tension nut, spin it, make a hurl rope, and then use that rotary feature to wrap it up the hook shank. I think we'll probably get one more in. So I'm going to make this a pretty good one. By making it bigger at the front, what that'll do is it'll help prop that collar of schlappen up. So again, I've got a pretty good size clump. Break those tips off, tie them in, putting them right up to the preceding clump. Oop, missed one. Go ahead and put your half hitch in, bring it forward. And you might lose some along the way, it's just part of it. Go ahead and spin that up. And then remember where you need to leave room to put that throat hackle in, which is going to be schlappen. So just make sure you don't crowd your head. So now we've got that body built, we've got a bit of a taper to it, which is exactly what we were wanting. And by using the Peacock in that method, it makes it very easy to do. Next up, I'm going to put a half hitch in, take my feather out of the clip. Now, a lot of people will preen these to the rear. On this fly, I don't do that too much. I kind of like them poking and sticking out all over. So with the hackle, I'm going to wrap it just regular. And then when I rib it, I'll counter wrap that so it'll protect that hackle a little bit. We're just gonna tie that off on the side nearest us. Put a half hitch in, and like I said, next I'm going to counter rib. So rather than spinning the vise towards me, I'll spin it away from me, so it's a little odd. And if you kind of wiggle it back and forth, it'll help it get through those hackles without mashing any of them down, and we will go through and pick out any that got mashed down in the process. I try to tie that off on the other side. Plenty fibers back that got moved forward. Now the only thing left we have is the schlappen. And for this, I like one that's pretty long. You want it to be, you know, a bit longer than the hackle you've already used. So I'm gonna start and tie it in a little further back than the tip. That way I'm getting into the longer stuff right out the gate, rather than having to add additional wraps of that short stuff. So I'm just gonna trim that end off, tie it in on the near side, And now this, I do like to preen those fibers back. You can also, if you want, remove the first few right there, and it'll help it lay a little bit nicer on that first turn. And for this, you're just gonna do two wraps. And it's kind of up to you, but 2 is more than enough. You don't want to go too crazy with it. One thing I have learned when tying things off like this, if you hold the hackle straight up, bring your thread straight up, and then bring the hackle down, that allows you to tie it in right by the stem. It moves those fibers out of the way so that you're tying it in just by the stem instead of trapping any of those fibers down. So just a little handy tip that you can use for various different types of flies. I'm gonna go in and pick out some of those that I see trapped in there. Not too many, but a couple. Next, we're just going to put a tidy little head on. Nice thing with the nano silk is it doesn't build up bulk very much at all, especially the smaller sizes. Okay, so our head built up. You can go ahead and put a whip finish on, half hitch, however you prefer to finish your flies. And then you can finish it with your favorite head cement or lacquer, Solares. Right now I'm using Healthy Hoof Lacquer. You can find it on eBay. It's actually for horses' hooves when they're prancing around in shows, but it makes for a really glossy head. It is pretty potent though, so just be careful when you're using it. So there we have it, the Near Enough, a Dave Clark pattern. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. To see more videos using the Norvise tying system, be sure to subscribe and also click the bell. That way you get notifications when new videos are posted. Thank you again, and we'll see y'all next time.